Okay, it says we're live, and all right. So thank you everybody for joining us here. My name is Dr. Jones, and I'm with Dr. Eberwein, but we like to keep things casual here, and you can just call me Dean and Rudy. And I thought I would switch things up here a little bit. Most podcasts come in with that very dry. Introduce yourself. And so really, Rudy, I want to just flip the script for everybody here and ask you, why should people listen to you on the topic of holistic obesity?
Yeah, so I like this, straight to the subject, man. So my specialty is internal medicine. So I worked a lot in the hospital before, but my goal was always, how do we prevent people from getting sick, from going to the hospital, from having to use conventional medicine? So I first started my weight loss clinic 18 years ago, back in 2005.
Wow.
And really, I didn't get any training from it in medical school. My undergrad major was all about nutrition. But I went to all the conferences that I could. FOM, AMMG, I actually got a board certification for AMMG. And I really learned. I went into the literature and read thousands of studies. And I have to say, over the past 18 years, just accumulating the evidence on the clinical experience and utilizing all the tools that have been necessary. And now those amazing tools that I've been using. And I started using GLP-1 medications back in 2005 for diabetes. Wow. So I have 18 years of experience with GLP-1s, 18 years of clinical experience dealing with obesity, and I love doing it.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So now let me flip the script. Why should people listen to you, Dr.
Yeah,
Jones?
I appreciate that. And it's definitely an honor to be on with you, to have somebody who's had that much clinical experience. So, for me, I dropped over 100 pounds like 22 years ago at the age of 16. And you would think you drop the weight that young, it's a good, good rebound, and, everything's great from there. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case for me. For about 8 to 10 years, I continued to yo-yo with my weight. I never regained the full 100 pounds because I was just like, never going to let that happen. But it seemed like every single year it was like a yo-yo of 50, 60 pounds. Very, very frustrating. I mean, this literal, I'm getting worried about, and if I'm being honest, I'm getting worried about summertime, thinking about taking my shirt off. And so come February, I did it the old school method. And I always, the old school method where I counted calories, counted macros, 6 meals a day, cardio, weightlifting, like total like overhaul, where your entire effort for weight loss has to center around that, and it's great for some people that can do that. But it's just, for me, as I was in college and life, I couldn't maintain that. It wasn't sustainable. And then I came across intermittent fasting, which I'll tell you, at that time, it was such a shocker, right? Like, skip meals, like you think you're going to lose muscle mass with my gym background. It was so wild. It took me a year of knowing about intermittent fasting before I actually dived in. And it made a huge impact. And then I started playing around with prolonged fasting, and at that point, because intermittent fasting just started becoming popular. Prolonged fasting was still, I think today, still people are a little bit like, well, how do you approach it? Like, your greatest fasting experts now say you can do it a couple times a year. I just kept doing it more and more often, and I just kept getting more and more results. And finally, I hit a point where I was doing like a 48-hour fast every week. Nobody had ever talked about doing it that much. And with my own experience, I was able to get extremely lean, and it was the easiest way of getting lean, like by far. And I was just able to maintain it. So, I backed off. I found a balance of usually a 48-hour fast. I usually do it once every 3 to 4 weeks. And that's how I stay in great shape. Very little cardio, just lift weights. And that's it. So I knew there was something special about that. I fast forward, became a doctor of chiropractic, and I'm working in a clinical setting, more functional health with patients. And I've always introduced fasting protocols, not just for weight loss, but for optimal health, a lot of autoimmune diseases. And it made such a huge impact. But it was like, what did it do for obesity, right? The inflammation, the insulin resistance, the metabolic flexibility. So then these GLP-1 medications come around, and I felt like, and you were actually the doctor that introduced me to the protocol of mixing AOD and the GLP-1s. And so once I found that combination, and then I paired it with our strategic fasting, which I'm looking forward to sharing with you later, because I ended up creating a protocol. We literally started getting results with patients where they would lose the weight, which is all great. I think everybody can lose weight with these GLP-1s almost, but then we were setting them up for success to be able to wean off. And so I think that's the biggest thing. And I see the passion that you have too, as well, is we were literally taking patients, using these medications and peptides, achieving weight loss, weaning them off, and they're maintaining it. Right. And that defies the literature. And that's why I ended up publishing my book recently, because I'm just so excited about that topic. So that's why people should listen to me, because I have a format to help you utilize these medications and wean off.
Amazing, man. And you know what? This is what we call the hero story, right? You had a challenge. You dealt with obesity. You went and studied. You did it yourself. You became a doctor. You came up with a protocol. And now you want to come back and tell people about this and bring people to this discovery that you made. And that's your legacy. So the fact that you were there, you pulled yourself out, and now you want to bring people to that good place. I commend you a lot for this, man. This is amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely appreciate that. This medication space right now is, oh my gosh, it's a never ending discovery. It seems like every day, every other day, there's the latest and greatest happening in the GLP-1 space. And for you, having worked in that space so long, I mean, I'm definitely interested to gain some clinical insight of what you've seen in terms of this industry and where it's gone.
Definitely. So, and even for your audience who may not know what GLP-1 is, let's start from the beginning. So GLP-1 stands for glucagon-like peptide 1 hormones, receptor agonist. That's the name of the medication. And what those medications do, they target incretin hormones, including GLP-1, GIP, and glucagon. But what incretin hormones do, the way they discovered that, they saw that when they gave somebody IV glucose versus oral glucose, the oral glucose would get an insulin spike. So they were like, there must be something in the GI system that gets extra insulin that the IV glucose load bypasses. And that's how they discovered the incretin hormones. Those 3 hormones I said, when you take glucose orally, your body secretes those incretin hormones to get rid of the sugar quickly. And that's been an evolutionary advantage to have this, because when you eat food, you want to quickly turn it into glucose, then put it into glycogen, and then store it. And this is a system that is not just in humans. It is in almost every animal. And actually, the way they discovered GLP-1 is a really interesting story. They found it in the Gila monster, the lizard. That's in their saliva. So that's where they found out the GLP-1. Actually, GLP-1, the discovery was made at UPenn. And, it's many different scientists who worked to bring it to science. And they were doing studies with it in the 1980s. It actually was up for a Nobel Prize. Recently, the mRNA discovery took the Nobel Prize. But I really felt like GLP-1 is up there to get a Nobel Prize, because it has completely changed the field of obesity and metabolic medicine. Because before we had GLP-1s, everything that you were saying, right, those were the tools that we had. 6 meals a day, spend 2 hours at the gym, count your macros, beat yourself down. You have 2 good months, then your addiction to food would kick back in, and then you go back to that same cycle. And the psychology of this gaining and losing weight and the yo-yo dieting that we've seen was such a big field that I discovered when I went into treating obesity. Until you go and you have a weight loss issue, a weight issue, and you gain and lose the weight, what happened to you, Dean, it's hard to understand the psychology of how it changes you on a deeply personal level. Because every time you go and eat again, you shouldn't eat that, but you feel like a failure when it happens.
Oh my gosh. And what's crazy is they're still pushing this rhetoric, and that it's all about calories, right? Like eat
calories in minus calories out.
It's so crazy to me. And I mean, that agenda is, and I get into discussions all the time with other experts, because there's still plenty of medical practitioners and health coaches that think that's the way. And they have this like block where it can't be insulin. Fasting doesn't matter. It's just calories. And we could probably make several podcasts talking about just the calories versus hormonal basis. but we'll save that for another podcast for sure.
For another podcast. So to keep going about the GLP-1 story. So 2005, the first GLP-1 was approved for diabetes. Again, I always tell people this is not a diabetes medication. The first approval was for diabetes, but it's an incretin-based medication, a GLP-1 receptor agonist that first approved for diabetes. So the first one was exenatide, and I used a lot of it. So I work at a Native American Indian clinic in Miami, and there's a high incidence of diabetes in that population. And most of their diabetes, it's mostly insulin resistance. So when I introduced the GLP-1 into that primary care clinic, we took out 99% of type 2 diabetics that were on insulin. And patients who are listening to this, if you're on type 2 diabetes, the last thing you want to do is to be on insulin, because insulin is a natural anabolic hormone that increases storage of body fat. So actually they did a study on type 2 diabetic patients. When they take insulin, yes, their A1C goes down, they have better glucose control, but their risk of heart disease, of coronary artery disease, atherosclerosis does not go down, because high insulin equates to risk of cardiovascular disease. So now you got the GLP-1 that came in and addressed the basis of what's wrong with type 2 diabetics. It's insulin resistance. So once you address insulin resistance, you'll get improvement of your blood sugar, you'll lose weight, and then you'll get protected from heart disease, protection from Alzheimer's dementia, which is now being called type 3 diabetes. So when I started using GLP-1 in 2005, it was like, wow, man, what an amazing treatment. At this time, exenatide did not have much for weight loss. My patients did not lose weight from it. Just their insulin resistance got better. Every 2 to 3 years, a new generation would come out. Finally, in 2014, the first GLP-1 was FDA approved for weight loss without having diabetes, and that was Saxenda. Liraglutide. I used a good amount of liraglutide. It was a daily injection. It wasn't great. Still did some weight loss. It was better than anything we had.
That was the first one that did get some weight loss with it.
Yes, yes. And it was actually FDA approved for weight loss. Daily injection was so-so until 2017 when Semaglutide became FDA approved. And first, Ozempic was FDA approved just for diabetes. But the weight loss that they were seeing in those trials was crazy. So if you compare Semaglutide weight loss versus liraglutide, Saxenda, it's a world of a difference. So again, that speaks so highly about how amazing our scientists are, right? They were able to take that one molecule and they played with it. They updated it. They upgraded it with the diffusion, all the great things scientists do. And it went from a purely blood sugar control medication to Semaglutide being amazing for weight loss. Then in 2021, Tirzepatide became FDA approved.
Yeah.
And Tirzepatide is like even more amazing. Because when they did studies, Tirzepatide, Mounjaro versus Semaglutide, Ozempic, the results are even better. More weight loss, less side effects, and it's just amazing. So what I try to tell people is, first, GLP-1 medications are not a new medication. There's a lot of coaches, doctors, even patients who are saying, I don't want to be a guinea pig. Those medications are too new. Well, guess what? They were first put in use in 2005. That's 18 years of experience that we have for them. And how do we know if a medication is safe? It's when millions of people take it for a long time and you see no side effects, no long-term side effects. That's when you feel comfortable. And I'm going to give an example of a weight loss medication, Meridia. Meridia was an SNRI. It was a weight loss medication closer to the phentermine type that was FDA approved back in 1997, 1998. FDA approval. It was touted as the most amazing weight loss medication. It's going to change the world. Well, 10 years, around 2006, 2007, it was pulled back because they started an increased risk of heart disease and vascular heart disease. It took 10 years for that to come out. So even when a medication is FDA approved, it doesn't mean that it's safe. It means that they checked it on maybe 200, 500, or 1,000 people. In the short term, they didn't see anything wrong. So my proof for my patients, I always tell them that I want to wait at least 10 years before I'm going to use a medication, because that's when I feel comfortable. Well, GLP-1s have been out 18 years.
Wow. Yeah. So what a story, what a story. One thing that you said that I really want to talk about, insulin resistance. So I've been under the impression this entire time, and this is why I have you on, because you're the expert here with the medication. It's not addressing the actual basis of insulin resistance, but you're making it sound like it is. Can we talk about that without getting too in depth for everybody listening? Because we know what insulin resistance is, a condition where the body's just no longer responding to insulin, and we know what causes that, lifestyle over time. But how do the medications directly, not because of the effects of lifestyle, we know it, you eat less, that's going to help it. But is there a direct mechanism outside of your lifestyle changes where these medications actually address insulin resistance? Because that's news to me if that's the case.
Yeah, listen, 100%. So when you think about insulin resistance, right? Insulin resistance is in a spectrum. So insulin resistance usually starts with, there are genetic predispositions. There are some people who store more fat in the belly fat, the visceral adipose tissue. But the more fat, the more visceral adipose tissue you have, the more your cells become resistant because of the inflammatory cytokines secreted by the visceral fat, the adipokines. So when you have insulin resistance, it starts from an increase in visceral fat. Then that goes into where the cell becomes more resistant to insulin. So the level of insulin has to go up to be able to dispose of the same amount of blood sugar. After a certain point, the cells almost do not take any more insulin. And like I said in the beginning, insulin is a hormone that promotes storage of fat. So what happens when you have high insulin level? It's a vicious cycle. You start with visceral fat, high insulin level, you make more visceral fat. Then you go into prediabetes, where you may see fasting hyperglycemia. The blood sugar starts going up. Then you have diabetes, where hemoglobin A1C goes up. Then that goes into cardiometabolic syndrome, where you have heart disease. You start having atherosclerosis. This is all part of insulin resistance. Then you have fatty liver. Fatty liver is a part of the metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance. And all the way out to Alzheimer's dementia, again, that is now being called type 3 dementia, and different types of cancers. So when you think about insulin resistance, it's all of those diseases, their base is insulin resistance. When you take a patient and you put him on GLP-1, it affects all of those different diseases, all of them, because it affects directly the sensitivity of insulin. Because what GLP-1s do, it increases your own endogenous insulin production.
It increases.
So endogenous insulin works better. So there's an intracrine effect where if you compare how much blood sugar gets disposed of with endogenous insulin versus exogenous insulin, endogenous insulin wins. So when you have an overactivation of GLP-1, or you take a GLP-1 medication, what happens is you dispose of the sugar quicker. That's again how they found out about incretin hormones. When you give IV glucose, it takes longer to get rid of. When you take oral glucose, your GLP-1 endogenous production goes up, your blood sugar goes down quicker. So GLP-1 addresses insulin resistance directly. So for example, you'll see that quickly. You know, I told you that spectrum. Right. Another great thing that GLP-1s have is for fatty liver. Actually, fatty liver we used to call non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, NASH. They just changed the name to metabolic associated steatohepatitis because they realize it's not just not drinking alcohol. The incidence of fatty liver has gone up so much, and they are seeing that it is associated with the metabolic syndrome, which is associated with insulin resistance. Well, guess what? GLP-1 are an amazing medication for fatty liver because, again, it addresses directly insulin resistance. We have another way that I usually diagnose insulin resistance, and I do that in kids a lot, kids or adults. You'll see that they have what we call acanthosis nigricans, which is those dark lines that you have either on the neck, usually increases on the elbow, in the knees, and they're very dark and velvety. Some patients think, oh, it's hygiene. If they're fat, there's rolls, and they think that it's bad hygiene. It is a marker of insulin resistance. You put patients on GLP-1, you will see that their acanthosis nigricans will improve before even they start having a lot of weight loss. So it shows you that it really goes down to address insulin resistance at its base. It's not just because you lose weight that insulin resistance gets better. It's that cycle, but it addresses insulin resistance directly.
That is huge. That is huge, and I appreciate that explanation because it will give you the secondary effect of being the initiator of lifestyle, suppressed appetite, make the changes. But there's a separate mechanism where it's just attacking the insulin resistance head on, which is, I guess you can say, for somebody who's really insulin resistant, really obese, that's the starting point. If they didn't have that, it would be hard to get the ball rolling.
That is such a great point, Dean. And you know what I love with your book, with your practice, is that you've added a holistic approach to this. Those GLP-1s are amazing, but they are not the panacea. They are not the only thing you should use. You have to use a holistic, all-encompassing support and program to do this. And you've done an amazing job, really. We're going to talk about your book because what you've done has been just amazing, truly. But what's important to know with those medications and with patients who suffer from insulin resistance and obesity, a lot of times it's not their fault. Because when you have insulin resistance and those high insulin levels, it hijacks your nervous system. Patients with insulin resistance have more visceral fat. The more visceral fat you have, it's a vicious cycle. You're more inflamed. The more inflamed you are, the hungrier you are, the less powerful your willpower.
Like
so that's exactly what you used to say. So willpower is something that I thought was static. I thought it's either somebody has it or they don't. You know what? Take anybody, get them to gain 80 pounds, 100 pounds, give them a lot of visceral fat, they're all going to lose willpower. And then this is what we're seeing with GLP-1. You put a GLP-1 on a patient, on a non-compliant patient. I'm getting those all the time. But primary care send them to me. He's pre-diabetic. He's heavy. He's fat. I told him to work out and exercise. He doesn't do it. He keeps eating. You put him on a GLP-1. Within 2 to 3 weeks, when it works, the click happens. And you see that non-compliant patient turns into a highly motivated guy or woman who can now do fasting, wants to go to the gym, is able to control themselves. So willpower is no longer static. It is hormonal. And this is where they really changed the classification of obesity as a willpower problem. And now it is a genetic disease that has hormonal implications. And I love that they've done that because it took a lot of the shame away from people who are dealing with weight issues to think that they are weak of character. That's why they're like this.
Oh yeah, I mean I get it literally all the time, and on the TikTok videos, and that I'm commenting and responding to when people, because I am holistic, and that is my big passion, and so a lot of people question the way I embrace these medications, but the overall viewpoint and where I'm going is still the holistic path. I want to get you off, but you have struggled. If I help people all the time do their weight loss issues naturally too with no medications. But let's be real. You know, I always joke for a very obese or insulin resistant person, without these medications, it's going to take some David Goggins like mindset. And is it possible? Sure. Is it real? No. Yeah. And that's the thing. That's like you said, like a non-compliant person, whether they're lazy or they really are trying, there's a barrier, and we have to make it easy enough for the individual. Everybody has their own set of standards of how easy it needs to be for them. And easy even sounds a little, not taking into consideration their life. Their life is full of so much stress, and they can only allocate so many mental resources to be able to allocate towards this program, towards their lifestyle. And so, you know, it's wild that these medications are able to do what they are. But thank you for sharing that insight and giving me a much better a clinical understanding of the actions, the dynamics of that. That's pretty amazing.
Definitely. And you know, something that I hate hearing about. So I actually came up with a term. You know, all those medication, I call them the tide medication, right? So it's Semaglutide, Tirzepatide, Liraglutide, the other tide medications. So I call it tide shaming. People are tide shaming patients into telling them, you don't need to use that. Try to lose weight naturally. Do it the hard way. Do it the old school way. Men up. Come on, you can do this. And you know what? Yes, it can be done. We know so many people before we have those medications that did it. Do it. There's a lot of people who are able to achieve that. And if you're able to achieve that without medications, you maintain your weight, good job. I'm happy for you. But if you're struggling with it and you're going to the yo-yo, why wouldn't you use a tool that was invented and shown that not only can it transform your life, now it's showing that it has cardioprotective benefits, right? Anti-inflammatory benefits, brain health benefits, gut health benefits. It helps with so much. So in a perfect world, like you said, if we kept living like our ancestors, we would not need those. But we live in a toxic world. We live in a world where our food has been depleted 80% of its nutrients, where they're spraying 400 million pounds of glyphosate and pesticides on our food that completely hijack our metabolic and nervous system. There was a study that was done recently. I have a lot of interest in endocrine disrupting chemicals, EDCs, and specifically obesogens. So obesogens are chemicals that hijack our metabolic system, and glyphosate is one of the most described ones. Glyphosate is what we find in Roundup. And they did a study the other day. They looked at women that were exposed at high levels of glyphosate during pregnancy, and they followed their children after giving birth. And they noticed that the women who had high levels of glyphosate, by the time their children got to 9 years old, most of them, there was a high incidence of increasing BMI and obesity.
Wow.
Not because those kids were eating bad. It was irrespective of what they were eating. It's because they were exposed in utero to that glyphosate, the obesogen, that completely messed up their metabolic pathways, and now it's easier for them to gain weight. So I told you, 400 million pounds of glyphosates are being sprayed on our crops every year. Imagine what's happening to that generation of kids who are growing up on wheat-type products full of glyphosate. So now it shows you that it's not just calories in minus calories out. Not only do you have those horrible foods, you have the addictive properties of those foods, because those foods have been engineered for us to be addicted to them. Then you have those obesogens that mess up our metabolic pathways, and now you find yourself in that cycle where you just can't do it. If somebody can do it without, great, I'm happy for you.
Exactly.
But if you need the tools, do not hesitate to use those medications. Find the right provider, like you, Dean, like me in my clinic, who don't just give you the medication, but put a whole program around it. So you use those medications as a tool to get you there, then hopefully you can come off, then keep all your good habits and keep the weight off.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's very 100% true. And I align with that big time. Not to tangent again too much on the hormones versus calories, but it's so crazy to me when I have these conversations. Like, do you think because like we holistic, the one big aspect of holistic practitioners, there's a universal concept, chiropractors, acupuncturists, a lot of them, Eastern practitioners, that there's a universal intelligence within the body that's existent within subcellular levels. And it's not really very detectable yet by science. Some aspects look at it, acupuncturists call it chi, whatever you want to call it. There's some, you gotta imagine and perceive this intelligence that can take two cells and turn it into an entire human living organism. Us, one of the most complex species. So you're going to think a body this complex and that has this much intelligence is not going to have some sort of regulatory system that would stop somebody from eating themselves to death calorie wise, right? Like you look at simple obese people, you run the numbers of what they're eating. They're only gaining on average like 5 pounds a year, 10 pounds a year. And you look at the numbers, they should be gaining 20 pounds a year.
Mm-hmm.
But the body literally has these mechanisms to speed up their metabolism and decrease their hunger because it's trying to fight it. So it's just crazy. Like, and we can, like I said, Obesity Code. I'm sure you've read that. That's my favorite book. And really, I think Dr. Fung set the tone and said, look, we can't base off of literature alone tell you that it's the hormonal basis of theory. We don't have that high level research yet. So technically we can say from a scientific debate, we don't know, but here's some small level research on multiple different mechanisms and multiple different pathways, and put it all together to tell a beautiful story that, okay, despite the randomized control studies saying it's hormones, common sense, when you understand the mechanisms, you don't need it. You don't need and I wish we had the RCTs to tell us about hormones, and I think we will eventually, but anyways.
Well, listen, I love what you said. So I'm going to make a couple of comments. Number one, although I'm conventionally trained allopathic medicine, I'm going a lot into Eastern tradition and understanding that inner force, chi, prana, in French, l'élan vital. So this energy, the Buddhists like to say Atman.
Yep.
Brahman is the universal consciousness, and we all have Atman in us. And that same energy that took 2 cells and turned it into us, it's that same energy that created the universe. So you're completely right. How come this energy that is so powerful that humans, Homo sapiens, are dealing with such issues? Well, you know what? No species ever had to deal with the amount of toxicities that we unleashed on our planet. And when you think about what Homo sapiens, our species, has done, we've eliminated so many species. There's been so many extinctions because of what we've done. But it is the first time that Homo sapiens is suffering the consequences of what we've done to the planet. Because if you look at our health over the past 50 to 60 years, right, the increase in incidence in chronic illnesses has jumped ridiculous amounts, whether it's cancer, cardiovascular disease, neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, cardiovascular disease, reproduction abnormalities. Sperm count has decreased 52% over the last 40 years. It's not our genes that change over the past 40, 50 years. It has to be the environment. So the environment is affecting us now. There's no question. And we're seeing that now our inner forces being our inner system or pathways that have evolved over millions of years are now over the past 50, 60 years being hijacked by very powerful molecules, chemicals, toxins, engineered foods that is not natural. Our body did not evolve to deal with those. We can process those chemical foods that we're eating. So yes, I do believe in chi, in prana, but we live in a toxic world. In a perfect world, we wouldn't need it. But once you can help liberate yourself from some of those addictive type behaviors, prana, chi can come out easier. So I a lot tell my patients this. We're going to help that as a tool, but don't forget that you have inner healing capabilities. Don't let any of this disguise this. Let's use that tool to help remove a lot of the noise, the grime, the toxicity that's around your light. But your light is what's going to guide you out of this.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that.
And another point I wanted to make is there's actually a brand new research about the theory of obesity. So there have been multiple theories of obesity before. One of the most common ones, like you're saying, it's the energy balance, right? Energy in versus energy out. Then they had the insulin balance, whether that's why keto diet tends to be better. Then they have the protein sparing hypothesis, where they say if you eat mostly protein, it's going to be able to save you to go more into protein. So the latest hypothesis that has a lot of research behind it, it's called the fructose survival hypothesis of obesity. Fructose. So fructose is very common. Find it in table sugar. It's everywhere. And what are we using in our country like no other place in the world? High fructose corn syrup. Because of the corn lobby, because we pay so much, our government pays so much for the corn industry, they have to find something to do with that corn. So we put high fructose corn syrup in everything. Yeah. And that study and that hypothesis, what it says, and it's proven by pathways, fructose is the only carbohydrate that actually decreases ATP production. So when you take in fructose, it goes mostly into storage. Yep. And when you think about it, what do bears tend to eat before they go into hibernation? They like fructose. They eat berries, fruits, honey. Because when you take fructose, you decrease your own metabolism, it decreases ATP production, and increases fat stores and gets you ready to go into hibernation. Sure. Well, guess what we did in our society in the US? We flooded every food that we take with high fructose corn syrup. It's in every yogurt. It's in every cereal. It's in ketchup. There was a study that was on TikTok. They looked at Heinz ketchup from the US versus Heinz ketchup in the UK. High fructose corn syrup in the US was the number 2 ingredient. They had none of it in the UK. So high fructose corn syrup. So that hypothesis, when we take that much fructose, it decreases our metabolism while increasing total energy. So they say that obesity now is a state of low energy production, low
Right.
ATP production, and high energy storage. Really interesting hypothesis, and it makes sense. And we all now, when we consume that much sugar, it's almost like we're bears going into hibernation. We pack on the fat and we're tired. Look at our society. It makes sense. So, we'll discuss more of that. I just found out about this last month. This hypothesis is pretty new. It was published, I think, in Nature, the journal. I forgot the name of the doctor who did it, but it's fascinating, and it explains, and it kind of put into one roof all of those things. It does go for the insulin, because when you do that, the fructose like this, your insulin resistance increases and total insulin level goes up. So if we can tell anybody who's listening, watch your fructose intake. It's really difficult to do in the US, but one of the most important things we can do.
There's so many topics we can go off on.
I know, man.
I definitely want to get into some of the holistic things that we can do to help people. On the fructose topic, 100% in agreement with you. High fructose corn syrup, the way the body responds to fructose, it's not the same as glucose, and your only your liver can process it, and unlike glucose can be processed by every cell in the body. So definitely makes sense why fructose is a problem, especially high fructose corn syrup, because it's even more processed, right?
More concentrated.
What's your opinion, without getting too far into it, on fructose that comes from whole fruit? Are you in the mindset where there's probably some unknown components about getting the fructose in the whole form, with all the additional phytonutrients that come along with it, that maybe in too much consumption can still be a problem, but in moderation is probably not only not bad, but probably good and still important and necessary in a healthy, sustainable weight loss approach?
Definitely. And everything that you said, it's the fiber that comes with it that makes you digest it much slower, all the phytonutrients. So fruits, that's where you get a lot of fructose from. Fruits are healthy to consume. It's when you isolate the fructose by itself without the fiber, so it's quickly absorbed, without the phytonutrients, that's when it is. But I'm going to tell you, one mistake that I see from some patients sometimes is they take too many fruits. There is such a thing as taking too many fruits. They do a smoothie in the morning, and when you look at the amount of fruits that they're putting in that, I'm like, no, put 1 or 2 fruits and put a lot of veggies. The low calorie, more fiber. So yes, whole fruits are great to take in, but you really have to be careful of the amount. But if you're going to consume fructose, you want it to be with the fiber.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm in the same.
Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
And I'm fascinated about your book, man. Tell me about your approach, the FLOA. What does it stand for? How do you integrate it into your holistic program of weight loss? And what have you noticed with your patients that you've done GLP-1 plus your FLOA approach?
Yeah, thank you. So FLOA, I thought the name was pretty catchy. I love it. My best friend John, who works with me, we came up with that name. So FLOA, pronounced flow, stands for fasting like our ancestors. Really what I did was I created structure where structure was missing in the world of prolonged fasting. I think, like we talked about 10 years ago, fasting was just in the infancy stages, still kind of like brushed off by a lot. And I think now, I think it's safe to say most people, it's hard to argue that intermittent fasting isn't good for almost everybody. I think at this point. But prolonged fasting is still that area where I think there's a lot of, maybe fear, maybe concern. Is it quote unquote dangerous? I mean, it's crazy when people talk about its potentially being dangerous. When you think about ancestral times, for 3 million years, human beings, that's about how long most people say we've evolved. The earliest ancestors of humans, we didn't have steady food supply. It wasn't until like 10,000 years ago. Exactly. I mean, so 10,000 versus 3 million, right? So everybody alive in the world today is a result of evolution's production of the most efficient species at developing the faculties within the body to be able to target food, consume a large amount of it, just like a bear going into hibernation, same concept, because we don't know when we're going to be able to get the next hunt and the next kill. Yeah. And so that was almost 3 million years of evolution. So now, 10,000 years, we barely started getting steady food supplies. And it's really for the last couple hundred years, the steady supply then became all processed. And then we have 1977 when the holy, I always call this the holy crap year, where the government came in and made that decision for everybody and said, carbohydrates.
Eat more carbs.
Yeah, eat more carbohydrates. And, because of the concern over heart disease. And that's when obesity and diabetes just took off,
Sure.
like crazy. So, but anyways, the flow protocol really just has ancestral tenets. When we look at fasting, we work our patients into some pretty aggressive weekly rounds of prolonged fasting. And so to be clear, I work with medical practitioners because I am a doctor of chiropractic. So anybody that works in our clinic, they get managed by both. So our medical practitioners will review the medical history, provide the prescriptions when necessary for our patients, and then I take over basically the coaching, the implementation of the holistic lifestyle strategies. And the centerpiece of it is the fasting. That's not everything, but that is the most powerful. That's the bread and butter, because we're taking people who likely at the most have done intermittent fasting, but a lot of times they haven't even done that. And then we, over week by week, I created stages. So for me, stage 1 of fasting is intermittent, also known as time restricted. And my favorite version of that is the 16-8. We could talk about, if we have time, why I don't like OMAD, which is the 1 meal a day. But 16-8, get your eating window down to an 8-hour gap. Your first calories in, last calories in, that's your eating window. Compress that to 8 hours. Most people, it's like 12 to 14 to 16 hours between their, it's basically all day for most people. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily meals, but they're not thinking that coffee with cream is starting, right?
Good point.
So that's stage 1. But the truth of the matter is, and some people will have miraculous changes just by doing that. But for most people, you got to lose more than 20 pounds. That's not going to be enough. It really isn't. Because at that point, 20, 30 pounds overweight or more, you start finding heavier levels of insulin resistance. So they're in a deeper hole and they need something more aggressive to get them out. And so that's where we start getting into the longer fasting. So for us, stage 2 is being able to complete a 24-hour fast 2 times in a week, spread apart, wow. usually 3. So that's already pretty strong. And we'll get them into that, right? And after they're there, they're able to do that. Then we start pushing the envelope to, okay, now the flow stage, which is stage 3, which is we're gonna take, because it's always that interesting, like it's a certain level of difficulty to go dinner to dinner. Once you've mastered that, it becomes easy. But going to bed the first time where you haven't eaten all day since the day before, that's the big land, the over the hill, right? The hump. And it's all mindset. It really is. I remember the first time I did that, fasted for that long and went to bed, and man, it's and it was like that for a while, and then now it's second nature. I don't think about it, but there is a little bit of like, especially talking to so many patients over the years, it's like, I can do this. Like, I'm not gonna die. I'm not gonna I could just go to bed, not having ate all day. And that's okay. And the irony here is not only is that okay, that's actually a powerful thing, mm-hmm. because you are forcing your body to mobilize the body fat and tap into the energy system that it's called fat mobilization, fat burning system. And for a lot of these people, their entire life, they've never done this, or they've only done it once or twice in the most extreme stressful situations. And if you do it like that, where it wasn't intended, of course, the difficulty level is through the roof, because you're already stressed out. Likely you didn't plan for it. When you plan for this, that's the difference between starvation and fasting. Fasting is planned caloric restriction as opposed to just daily caloric restrictions over time, or when it's unplanned. So very, very different. But we get them once they can do that, that's the 36 hour window. And then week by week, they're just taking that weekly long fast and extending it till they can get to the full 48. I have found for most people, even the very obese, once we can get them to their 48, that's like the hallmark. That's like, okay, great, I did it. Now do it again next week. Do it again next week. And we just have them find, even though you can make an argument that there's probably better results if you vary it every week, because it's 2 out of 7 days and people have usually a family, and dinner is an event. I just have them plan it consistently. say Monday night to Wednesday night. That's your 48-hour window. So your family gets adjusted to it. You get used to it, and it just becomes part of the routine. And so we have them do that week by week by week. And it's crazy how fast the fat is falling off their body while they're becoming more insulin sensitive, while they're becoming fat adapted, and while their inflammation is dropping, because we know fasting does all of that. Mm-hmm. And prolonged fasting does it even more. And this is the most aggressive format of prolonged fasting that I've ever seen. I haven't seen anybody. And that's why I created this protocol, because I felt like there was no structure in this world, and came up with a cool name. And that's what we do. And I did it with patients before the medications and peptides, but man, it was hard. Like we talked about before, most people couldn't get into it. There was a lot of supplements I've researched over the years to help. And it's like David versus Goliath in terms of the strength that this medication offers. And I'm all for it. You know, better living through science is one of my favorite expressions that I got from Ben Greenfield. And I think it's so true because like you said earlier, like it's a switch that they need. They need that initial push. But I think the ancestral wisdom behind the fasting is what's going to make the changes very fast too, no pun intended, that they need so that when they lose the weight, all of a sudden now they're insulin sensitive again. Their inflammation levels are more controlled, and they're fat adapted. Then what we do once we hit their goal, generally speaking, is they start to wean off the medication, still watching their weekly weigh-ins. That's the marker is weekly weigh-ins. That's like your self-check. Is my weight stable? Yeah, they're looking at pictures, they're looking at their bodies, but really just making sure that their weight is staying the same. Then they do their first week of fasting without the medication. That's also a milestone too, because they're like, oh my God, I did a 48-hour fast without Tirzepatide. I've never done that. It's a milestone to do it with Tirzepatide. And then milestone number 2 is doing it without. And it really does show them, because everybody knows how hard it would have been to have done that fast in the past without the medication. It would have been impossible. Now they can, because we made those changes to their physiology. So it's step by step, right? Now they're fasting 48 hours every single week without the medications. Weight is stable. Then the next step is, okay, let's go down to every other week, right? And then they do that for a month or two, weight stable. And then from there, they find their rhythm. I find that for most people, one 48-hour fast every 2 or 3 to every 4 or 5 weeks is necessary for most people to maintain a healthy weight for the rest of their life. Now, mind you, they're still doing intermittent fasting every day. They're still doing resistance training, but and we're eating a lower processed diet, so paleo Mediterranean, 80% of the time. During the program, I tell them 90-10, but when you're in, I call it flow lifestyle, which is where my patients are at maintaining weight. Now I go, okay, we can have more wiggle room, 80-20. 20% eat whatever the heck you want. Just weigh yourself once a week. Just keep doing that for the rest of your life. Just make that a routine, because that's your checks and balances. Mm-hmm. Anytime it starts creeping up, just increase your window of fasting, because the reality is life is so dynamic. There's going to be months where stressful stuff happens and you fall off the bandwagon and you eat like crap and you stop exercising. Well, guess what? Now you have a thing that you can do. If you have to go back to fasting for 48 hours every single week for a month, just to kind of like undo all that damage and get back on track, fantastic. I can do that no matter how stressed I am. I can do that. But think about what tools they had before in the past. I got to go strict on my diet. I got to go to the gym for a ton of it. It's just not real with how stressful life is for most people. So I think that's one of the hallmark features of what I figured out is this fasting protocol is so aggressive that it affords a much lower level of discipline that no other program that I personally think and seen allows for, to where you are still successful in all the aspects that we need to be successful in.
Amazing, man. I'm going to tell you, when I read the book, that's when I was like, wow, that is an aggressive fasting program. But you know what? I know, man. I know it works. I know you're doing it with hundreds, if not thousands of patients. So congrats for coming up with this, for guiding your patients through this. Because, one concept that I love is every human being needs little wins in their life, and then you build on the wins, right? One of my favorite saying is, the better it gets, the better it gets.
Right.
So a lot of times those overweight patients, non-compliant, they've internalized that I'm a loser. I can't lose weight. I'm a fat person. They've internalized this. They've lost power. So what you doing with this? What the GLP-1 medication do for a lot of those who feel like they've lost power? They feel in the beginning like they gain control of their food. They're no longer subject to this chemical addiction to food. So GLP-1s a lot of time helps break that. But you're so right, man. When you start doing even a 16-8, the patients usually will tell you, man, I feel so proud of myself. This is amazing. So I've never had my patients do a 48-hour fast. I'm going to start follow the flow protocol, man. And for patients to get there, to be able to do this, it's an achievement that you can turn around as the patient and pat yourself in the back. Be like, look what I've done. Even if you didn't lose your weight yet, but this sense of accomplishment that you no longer, that food doesn't just put you down and you have no power over food. It's a powerful feeling. And when patients get this becomes addictive. Now they want to do more. They want to do more positive behavior. So again, you put them, I like to call it the vortex of wellness, right?
I like
Everything, it's a spiral. It's either we spiral up or we spiral down. What you're doing with them, you help them spiral up and get into a vortex of wellness. Because as you said, once patients start doing this, they're like, what else can I do? I'm going to start going to the gym. I'm going to start lifting heavier. I'm going to start doing this. I'm going to start not having sodas. I'm going to stop my diet sodas. So it starts a vortex of wellness where now you feel like you're confident in your abilities instead of just saying, I was stressed and I had a cookie.
Yep. 100%.
Amazing, man.
Yeah, no, thank you. And you know, it's really cool. One of my favorite things about how I approach it in the group format that when I'm coaching people is I'll educate them in the beginning. Because if I had to summarize the main point, it is moving people to that aggressive stage, right? Of fasting, the flow stage, right? But how do we get them there? How long does it take? I literally let them choose. I explain to them, look, are you a rip the Band-Aid off kind of person? Or are you a pill it off kind of person? Because honestly, there's no right way or wrong way to do this. If you're a rip the Band-Aid off kind of person and you start bleeding profusely, just put the Band-Aid back on. It's totally okay. Because if you, some people are like, I can just try a 48. And I'm like, yeah, it's not going to kill you. Like if you try it and you quote unquote fail, we got to erase that thought process because you just did 24 or 18. How much more was that than your last fast before?
Yeah.
So some people have this level of courage and I want to embrace it. If they're scared, then that's totally fine. Wherever your mindset is at, because there's three things. They have their own level of inflammation, insulin resistance, obesity, right? So their body's going to give up that much of a challenge. Number one. Number two, they all have their own innate level of mindset strength. It's going to be unique to each one of them. That's another variable. Number three, they have a certain amount of stress that they're going through in their life at that time. That's unique to all three of them. So how could I come in and tell them how fast or how slow they should go? It doesn't make any sense at all. I just empower them with an understanding of here's what happens if you go really fast. If you go too fast for your body, you just won't be able to complete it. That's okay though. You document how long you did on that fast and you beat it next time. Some of you are going to blow yourself out of the water because you're going to try a 48 and you're going to do it. And you're going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. And you get to pat yourself on the back, but it doesn't matter. You choose the rate of the speed at which you want to push yourself, knowing that the end goal is get to that weekly 48, intermittent the other days. Once you get there, you just ride that till the weight loss happens. There's going to be some variability. Well, I call it flow fasting variability. We're going to have to switch things up time to time. We're going to introduce a week of keto here and there. There's all these little things to keep it rolling, but that's the general gist till we get them to their end goal. And then we start to transition them off.
Amazing, man. You've really come up with something amazing. And I know you're going to get flack from the traditional community. You're going to say, you're pushing yourself too much. You know, how crazy that the traditional dietitian or nutrition still tell people eat 3 meals a day plus 2 snacks. Your calories, you want to eat minimum of 2,000 calories. You want a 500 calorie deficit and you lose weight that much. This is still, how did we go from, that's how I got trained when I was doing my nutrition classes.
Right.
3 meals a day plus 2 snacks. When we used to train, the people who train eat every 3 hours. That is so much like the opposite of what we should do because you're always keeping your insulin levels up. So it's crazy how the pendulum has swung, that we're on the other side now. But traditional medicine and traditional nutrition still does not believe in this too much. So you're a trailblazer, my friend. You're really pushing the envelope in the name of health. So proud of what you've done.
Yeah, and thank you so much. I do my best to utilize as much literature that is available. There's two things in my mind I want to bring up. Since we're talking about literature and we're talking about prolonged fasting, and we need more literature in this space, of course. Are you familiar with the clinical? It was a study on just one individual. I'm blanking on his name, but he fasted for an entire year, and he lost 300 pounds, and he maintained that for the rest of his life. Like I mean, and he was observed, he was healthy, he was safe, all his health issues went away, and that's it. He went back to eating and stayed skinny, stayed normal for the rest of his life. The fact that we never took that and said, maybe we should look at this. Maybe we should do something with this.
Yeah.
But we know why that is. It's unfortunate. I'm not even going to say anything about it because I don't want to, get people mad at me. But I think that this is for that's like the most extreme example. And I've seen a lot of literature on like random, like 1 month fast. Like we have the Ramadan studies. I mean, there's a lot. Of course, we need a lot more. We absolutely need a lot more. I can't tell anybody that based off the literature, this is the safest thing to do. I can only share with you what I've done on myself and what I've done on patients. And we always encourage people like this is if you're going to make this decision to go on this journey with us, talk to your primary care physician, get that permission because they know your health better than me. But I don't know. I know very little situations where I think this would not be ideal. Pregnancy would be one example. And when we talk about kids, if they're overweight, I think this is great for overweight kids. Maybe not the 48, but maybe some of the intermittent, because they got extra body fat on their body, and that's a detriment to their health.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on that?
No, 100%, man. It's we don't have enough research on prolonged fasting. But if we just look at evolution, the way our species evolved over the last 3 million years, exactly, there were always times of feast and famine. You kill something, you get to eat. Then you don't eat for 1, 2, 3 days a week until your next kill. So our body evolved to be like this. It's only recently, like you said, the last 10,000 years, then when the agricultural revolution happened, and then now food is plentiful, it's everywhere. Our species never evolved like this. So going back to that ancestral way of living, ancestral way of eating, wouldn't do us so much good. But there's so much demonization of this, right? There's so much traditional medicine looks at this like, if you don't have a randomized controlled trial, it's not good. So let's fall back into the eating every 3 hours. This is so wrong. And we can say a lot of those studies were sponsored by the food industry. So they have a bias to make people eat as much as possible. The milk industry, the egg industry, the corn industry, they're the ones who are sponsoring our studies, our food studies. When I did my nutrition major at University of Florida, those were the sponsors, all of those big food industries. So there is a bias in this. If we eat less, let's talk about this, GLP-1 medications and their economic impact. Wall Street is talking about semaglutide. Why? Because when people take this, it empowers them to eat less, to not want to eat processed foods because you don't feel good when you take a GLP-1 to eat junk food. So people are eating less junk food. So the stocks of companies like Walmart, Cheez-It, Nestle, Kellogg's, they all went down because they're like, oh my God, people are not eating our junk food. We should celebrate this. This is an amazing thing. Now imagine if 70% of Americans are either overweight or obese. Imagine 70% doing fasting like what you're saying. Our food industry would collapse. That could be a great thing. Again, I'm a capitalist also. We need to make money. But we should not make money feeding unhealthy junk to a population.
Yeah. No, it's so true. And to everybody listening that has tried to start intermittent fasting, One common, and it's a very logical question, and I think this is what, actually leads a lot of practitioners to recommend 6 meals a day, because clinically, and I'm sure you have a strong opinion on this too, there's a lot of people who will feel better when they eat 6 meals a day versus 3 or 2, and when they eat spread out the day. And so my understanding of this was always just the simple fact that you have 2 energy systems. And if the one energy system is a system that's completely rusty and unused and untrained, it'd be no different than a person who's never lifted weights in their life, and you throw them in a gym and you tell them to lift weights. They're going to suck at it. Like the system is untrained. So of course the brain is freaking out, not getting the stable levels of glucose. And so you tell that person to eat 6 meals a day, they feel better. But what is better for their health? And the body responds to stressors positively. Weightlifting is a great example. Getting sick and developing an immune system, which is why I never get the flu shot, and I never will, because I trust my body's own innate immune system, and I want it to fight. I want it to fight and stay tough, And
Yeah.
so
that's what they call hormetic stress, right? It's if you stress your body just enough, it's actually really good. And that's why now we're seeing that all biohackers are using that. Whether it's fasting, lifting weights is a form of stress, cold plunges, a form of stress, all of those things. So our body was made to function like this, right? It's almost, we think about a gazelle that's grazing in the plains of Africa, and it gets attacked by a lion. It runs, and it's all of its hormones are high, the epinephrine, the adrenaline. But then once the danger is past, it can just go and keep grazing. What do we do as humans? Once we have a stress, we keep talking about the stress. We keep reliving the stress. So we live in constant stress. That stress is not good. So that's why people think always stress is bad. That is constant chronic stress. But short bursts of hormetic stress, like what you're talking about, fasting, weightlifting, cold plunges, lifting weights and challenging your muscles, then followed by a period of rest, there's nothing better for the body.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah,
Man,
we could talk about this for hours.
Honestly, I'm really excited to be, so anybody watching this, me and Rudy are definitely planning on, we're going to get on a schedule here. I mean, I'm speaking, hopefully, I think you're on the same page. We got to do this regular. I think there's too much clinical insight that each of us have to offer in this space right now. And I think there's not enough people talking about the holistic approach towards GLP medications. And it's obviously why I wrote this book. I'm so passionate about this. And I have so much to learn, just spending the time today. You taught me some great insights. So, I'm definitely looking forward to more podcasts. So we will definitely, everybody watching, release a schedule for you guys. How could people get in contact with your clinic and work with you?
Yeah, definitely. So first, I'm on social media. My handle is Dr. Rudy Best Life, Dr. Rudy Best Life. I try to put a lot of material talking about this, talking about tide shaming, letting people, empowering people, fasting. So we're going to do a TikTok live soon. Then my clinic, it's called Medical Health. So it's www.medicalhealthinstitute.com. We have a great website. We're in Miami, but we work virtually. We worked together before, Dean, and it was amazing. I so respect your resolve, your skills, your intellect, and the book that you put out is amazing. So looking forward to doing more with you, because we need more soldiers, foot soldiers, to fight this good fight.
Yeah.
Our species is losing. We've never had such high levels of chronic illness, death, horrible things that are happening to our society. Our kids, the next generation, teen obesity, kid obesity, it's ridiculously high. We need to make a change. And the way we make a change is by empowering each individual. Whether you need to use the tool of a GLP-1, the tools of fasting, anything you can do to get you there, then your inner healing can take over. But don't hesitate to use those tools. Find the right providers to help get you there. But we need to stop being the slaves of this biochemical engineering of foods and chemicals that they're releasing on us.
100%. I agree with that 100%. There's so many topics in my head that keep coming to me. One topic that we're going to do is going to be mindset and GLP-1s, because I regularly train them in anticipation of the day when they got to come off of it. They got to take off the training wheels. And people, it's a natural mechanism, not to the fault of the person, but when you keep getting helped, the help that the GLP-1 gives you, you're not developing your mindset is like every other system. It needs to fight. You got to force your mindset. And so while we needed it in the beginning, I think it works against us when you talk about maintenance dosing, because I hate to use the word lazy, but in that scenario, when the weight's completely off of you and you are still refusing to get off your ass and do some necessary, routine health lifestyle strategies, yes, I think it's a crutch. And so anyways, that's a whole nother conversation. I love your insight on that, because this does act on the hypothalamus and it does act on the brain, and we still don't fully understand how it does that. So it's wild. I'll just share with you what I do and how I educate my patients on the mindset. Like, for example, some people come to us and they're in a plateau. That's a whole nother topic we can talk about is weight loss plateaus. And so when we fix their plateau, it's the general approach is get them to eat more over time. So we usually take them off the medication, and it's like, there's always some resistance, like, oh my God, you want me to stop? I go, yeah, because the instructions for the next 3 weeks are slowly eat more. So why would you suppress your appetite for the next 3 to 5 weeks if the instructions are to eat more? And not only does that help them eat more, because they've been eating such a low amount for so long because nobody guided them, and that's what speeds up their metabolism when it starts to feel like it's no longer in starvation mode. But then they also get to like feel what normal feels like, which is absence of powerful artificial appetite suppression. So anyways, I just wanted to share that with you. But guys, if you want to follow me, so Colorado Medical Solutions, you can find us on TikTok. You can find us on all the social medias. I'm just launching our podcast too. So you'll find it on YouTube, and we'll end up putting this out everywhere. But we are the most active on TikTok, I would say, and Facebook, but all social media outlets. And you can find my book on Amazon. Just type in Fast, Feast, and Flourish. And we do have a free Facebook community too, as well, where I don't think I've told you, Doc, about this, but I'm on such a mission right now to help 1 million people battle obesity in a holistic format. So I created this free Facebook group. And in that community, I'm just helping people with their weight loss on GLP. So if you're in a situation where you just financially, and I know there's millions of people like this, you cannot afford a single extra dollar, I hope that group helps you. If you're getting your medications prescribed to you by your doctor, I am happy to give the free resources in that group. And all I ask people in that group is just spread the word and tell your friends and family members. That's all I ask for that. So you can find that group on my social medias. All of them have a link tree. And on this video, I'll put the links that you guys can find it and have all these resources available to you. But looking forward to the next one, Rudy. Definitely, this has really opened my eyes to how sooner we should have done this.
Yeah, man. Yeah, completely. This was amazing. Great information. I love your passion. I love what you're doing. We need way more people like you and me to really fight this fight. Absolutely. We're losing against obesity. But you know what? I'm an optimist. With fight like this, with tools like this, we can make a difference.
Awesome. I couldn't agree more. Thanks, Rudy.
My pleasure, man.
We'll see you guys later. Absolutely.